All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. This is Unifying Communications and Applications, a practical blueprint for better outcomes. I'm Sean Cordner. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Amplix. I've got a couple of great guests with me today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Sam from CallTower.
Yeah, hey everybody, thanks for jumping in. As Sean mentioned, I'm Sam Barron with CallTower. I'm one of the senior directors here at the company. I've been working with Amplix and team for many years now. I'd say almost over 10 years. I've been at the CallTower for about 11 and change. Been in the UCaaS and CCaaS space since then, providing various types of services to customers, from the Cisco stack to Microsoft Teams and so on and so forth. But it's good to be here, and looking forward to the webinar.
Yeah, good to have you, Sam. Sam is also one of the tallest people that I know in this industry. Um, Raf, we haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person here, but this is Raf from Dialpad. You want to give a quick intro?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Raf. I'm one of the senior partner sales engineers here at Dialpad. And we worked with Amplix quite a bit. And this is definitely one of my first with you guys. So it's pretty exciting to get on board with someone like Sam and Sean to get through this. And been at Dialpad for it's almost 3 years now. But previously, telecom in general has been about over a decade. So, you know what they say, once you're in telecom, you don't get out. And it's something that you do absolutely love doing. So I'm really excited to be here and can't wait to have a great discussion with you guys today with Sam.
That's right. You don't get out, but you do change logos pretty often.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, two great panelists, two great partners of Amplix. So appreciate you guys joining us today. So where I want to start is just to set the table a little bit. There was that old saying, there's an app for that, right? So that was referencing kind of the explosion of applications in the consumer technology space. But we're seeing that same kind of explosion in enterprise technology. So every department, every different operation has an application that comes along with it. And, it's really revolutionized how enterprises work today, but it's also, it's created data silos. It's created complexity, as well as opportunity when things are, integrated well. And so there's a lot of upside to it as well. So I just wanted to have this conversation about the UCaaS, Unified Communication as a Service space, and just kind of talk about the benefits of integrating your UCaaS platform with the different business applications that are running the business, and what are some of the risks as well. So to start us off, and maybe I'll just kick it off with Sam. How has the role of UCaaS evolved beyond just voice and messaging, and how's it really become a strategic part of the business technology stack?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started in the industry, Sean, it was kind of customers were picking different unified communication solutions to replace like traditional phone system capabilities, right? That was kind of the key piece of cloud unified communications or cloud communications in general. And now it's kind of evolved to what application best fits the company's business versus what functionality can we, design and develop in this new UC offering. Originally, there were different companies out there that would provide super advanced at the time functionality outside of just messaging and voice, right? Things like call recording was, cool at the time, or different, right? Things like more advanced reporting analytics, even like text messaging service back in the day was, new in the UC space. Now, a lot of us, right? A lot of the UC providers out there are providing very similar functionality when it comes to, any type of business communications that a company's looking to enable. So the industry's really changed into not necessarily what provider can do it all. It's more what provider, what application fits best in our business, what application we're using internally, whether that's Office 365 or Google, right? Whatever it might be, the companies are now making decisions based on the consolidation of an application perspective versus like what features we can roll out. That's what we're seeing is kind of the new, if you will.
Sure. How about you, Raf? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what we're starting to see too is really just a big boom of what can we do to simplify the processes for many of these guys. And it's simple as everyone wants to do an all-in-one application. Everyone wants to have deep integrations into their CRMs and productivity suites. And like Sam was saying, it's kind of crazy to see it now, especially from where I've been, and just saying, hey, call recording and screen recording was something that was considered one of the craziest things to have. And now it's just table stakes for a lot of people. So being able to see that, hey, all in one, being able to do these deep integrations, that's where I'm really starting to see the shift of where people are starting to have different perspectives, especially from a UCaaS environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, these applications, your CRM being a perfect example of it, right? But there's a lot of other applications that contain data that can be leveraged by the people that are using the collaboration platforms and UCaaS platforms, right? So, the standard case is if you're a salesperson and you've got an integration with your CRM and you're using your UCaaS application to make a sales call, you've got all their data at your fingertips. So having an integration with that CRM and other applications I guess puts us closer to that one application that has everything, right? Of course, we're not really going to have that application, but
Yeah.
it almost makes your UCaaS platform kind of a dashboard for your business, right? For the person that's driving. Um, but I think conversely, there's also data that's being generated through those conversations on these collaboration applications that can be leveraged elsewhere in the business. So, maybe Sam, can you talk about how integrating, benefits you by allowing you to pull in data, but also what are the benefits of pushing data from these conversations and collaborations?
Yeah, for sure. So all the different UCaaS tools, depending on what the customer's looking for, as different levels per se of CRM integration and different data that you can either pull or push from that unified communication application. A good example would be if I'm on a call and I'm either recording the call or the call is being transcribed via some AI application. That data is obviously conversational data that you can do stuff with now, whether it's like summarizing the call and pushing that into your CRM. So every interaction I have with that customer is, actually tracked in the system versus me as the salesperson or me as the, person at the company having to manually put that data into the ticketing system or the CRM. So it's like simple things like that we're seeing companies make decisions on based on the integration levels that they need. And that can be done at a UC level now versus having to upgrade all the way to a CX platform or a contact center platform. So really, it comes down to not necessarily the scalability, but the feature requirements per department, what they're looking for specifically that can help with their productivity from a personnel standpoint. And then most unified communication companies out there have different levels of integration you can tie into the mix, depending on what the customer is looking for, right?
Yeah. Uh, Ref, I think Sam's example speaks to operational efficiency in some ways, right? So,
Yeah.
that data, being inputted for the user, so the user doesn't have to take time to put it in there. And you had mentioned it as well, operational efficiencies through these integrations. So maybe just kind of talk a little bit more about the use case for creating operational efficiencies through integration.
Sure. I see it from another perspective too. To Sam's point, a lot of this actually ends up saving them money in a way. And I'll tell you why. So, time is money. And we always say that. The more time that we're spending putting in notes, going into not even a contact center world, but let's say someone at a front desk receptionist, they're taking these notes to help schedule an appointment and do all these things. By them spending that extra time doing those notes, it is time wasted. There's another thing for them to allow them to save all that time, therefore to be able to be more efficient at what they do. So time is one thing I definitely start to see being saved with these types of items. The second thing I also see it is kind of like a training perspective. Imagine if you can autonomously automate some of this just a little bit, even a small fraction of it. Being able to do that really makes a big difference in your day-to-day operations, and people love that. And then last but not least, from a technological standpoint, a lot of providers out there now are providing open APIs. So that way people can actually integrate to their own unique CRMs or maybe something that you typically don't see on the marketplace out there. And they're enjoying it. They're loving that because now they have the freedom to either develop their own or maybe use that provider to create one for them. And that was something in the back in the day was really unheard of. It was one of those things that was either super expensive or I see it from a perspective of they're just like, sorry, can't do it. Now you're seeing more can do's versus can't don'ts.
Sure. Yeah, this is the trend in technology, right? Is the big functionality and the really cool stuff starts off being very expensive and only accessible to the largest enterprises, and then over time, it becomes more democratized and
Yep.
available the smaller businesses and through the mid market and then the SMB market. And maybe in that same vein, Sam, and this might be just a dumb question, but you had mentioned the difference, between some. This could be the difference between going from a UCaaS platform to a CCaaS platform, having some of this functionality baked into your collaboration platform. So, I'm wondering, the use case for a big business with a large contact center is obvious. That's a stark difference, right? That's going to obviously be a
Oh, yeah.
CPaaS type of play. But, for a mid-market business that maybe has a sales team, maybe has a support team, how can you tell them to, when is the right time to start looking at CCaaS versus UCaaS?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really going to come down to like vetting out how they function as a business on a day-to-day basis and what the application itself can do for them in specific, aspects of their business, right? So customers don't know what they don't know from a, UC perspective versus a contact center perspective. Some of the capabilities blend together, but what I like to tell customers, and Raf, I'm sure you see this on a daily basis as well, is some of your departments might operate as quote unquote a light contact center, but don't necessarily need to jump into a full-fledged contact center solution. And that's the vetting process that, the Amplixes of the world help customers out with to make sure they're, picking the right solution. And what's cool about these different applications is there's levels to them, right? So it's not like you need to, if you have a department that needs call recording, transcribing calls, pushing data into CRMs, they might not necessarily need to jump into a full-fledged CX solution. When we look at contact center solutions, it's mainly for like that team that's trying to enhance customer experience, right? That's why the CX acronym's out there. Other departments in the organization, although they might be customer facing, they're not necessarily a customer experience type role, but they want to be these personnel in the organization might want to be more productive. So when they're working with the customers or even working on internal, processes or procedures, being more productive doing that is going to, help out with the operational stuff behind the scenes, make them more productive and, potentially make the business run better. Right. So it's really back to your question, right? The differences between the UCAS side of the house versus the CCAS. It's really about the vetting process, taking a consultative approach to make sure that the customer understands the different aspects and functionality they can build out into these solutions. And then they can pick and choose with a flexible licensing approach, pick and choose what applications they want to, position or give access to each of these departments.
Sure. Um, Raf, you had mentioned a lot of applications have open APIs, and a lot of these platforms, allow you to integrate with those APIs. I wonder if maybe you could tell me what are some creative use cases that you've run across that are more than just integrating a UCaaS platform with a CRM.
Yeah. I think some of the some of the craziest ones that we've really ran into is the EHR EMRs in the healthcare space. There's really not a lot of integrations out there. I mean, you have your common ones that you tend to see, like your Epics, possibly Athena Health, things like that. But then you run into these smaller practices that are creating their own unique EHR EMRs from the ground up. And I'll tell you, it's a process. And to Sam's point, you absolutely have to scope those things out. You have to understand what their use cases are. What do they actually want to do with it? What is their end goal to accomplish by using an EHR EMR with something as simple as a UCaaS or even possibly a CCaaS platform? And the biggest thing we run into is understanding what level of data is considered okay in those systems. What kind of data is safe for you to have there? HIPAA compliance, all those standards are part of that. But what I'm starting to see a large shift in too, as well as outside of just like EHRs, EMRs, is the way that we start to see contact centers. So like Sam talked about, and this is a big deal now. A contact center is no longer a boiler room anymore. It is not just 100-seat people in a one room ripping those calls all day, every day. We can now see a contact center, something as simple as 5 people taking those inbound calls. And it's just a matter of how are they handling those processes with those calls? Is it because you have a service center, like maybe internal IT help desk? That could be considered a contact center away because they're servicing their clients internally. Or maybe it's just, hey, I get like 100 calls a day, but I only got 5 people answering those calls at a time. that could be something that could be a use case. And where I start to see the big changes is like, do you need coaching utilities? Are there coaching utilities that are required in this space? And typically that's where you start to see contact center play a large role, is because you're looking for things like coaching utilities. You want to have more than one channel of communication. It's not just voice anymore. And as you start to grow, we start to see that, oh, okay, cool. Like you can have a 5-person contact center and they can do everything else that a 100-person contact center previously could in the past. It's pretty impressive to see the change of where we're starting to see that go.
And I think too, Sean, just to add to that a little bit, because I liked where Ralph was going with that. The different integrations that we're looking at or that we're seeing in the marketplace, not only CRM integrations, different departments use different applications, even in the same company, right? So you might have a billing team using a billing platform, the IT help desk using a ticketing system, right? So the open API access that Ralph was talking about is nice to be able to tie into these different applications while keeping the customer on a centralized application for, communication wise. But we're also seeing, back to what Ralph was talking about in the training aspect, right? Or the onboarding process, is the customer service reps, or, the average contact center has a lot of turnover, right? So whether it's a, employee that stays for a year and goes to a different contact center, and new hires are coming in every day, right? So some of the other integrations that we're seeing are things like database integrations for information to be popped in front of the agent before they make that customer, interaction, right? Or have that interaction with the customer. So they know who they're talking to, but then the applications now, or the contact center solution now, can pull different information based on questions asked by that customer to allow that person to have more information, even if they're a new employee, to be able to then, present better, talk and answer the questions better to the actual end user, because they have a database of information that kind of auto populates in front of them. Right. So
Yeah, it accelerates the onboarding, right, and reduces
yeah,
the
exactly.
ramp for new agents. That makes sense. But what you're talking about, both of you, sounds a little bit like you're dancing around the AI subject, right? Because these
Always.
are
Yeah.
AI tools that you would find in a CCaaS platform, at least. So is that how some of this is being done? And maybe you could talk to me about AI in the UCaaS versus AI in the CCaaS space.
AI is taking it's really changing the game in a lot of ways, and I'm starting to see AI being used in so many different spaces, but it's a matter of knowing when it's right to use it and when it makes sense to really use it, because AI is only as good as what you have set up internally. And the perfect way to picture this is, imagine if I have a lot of internal data and that data is not organized and it's all over the place, and people are having issues understanding it. There's only tribal knowledge in the world. If you were to just give that to an AI model and not really give it much context, it's not going to know. Like, it's going to spew out stuff to you, but it's not going to be an all in all solution. And I think the problem that we run into today with AI is everyone thinks they can solve everything with AI. And the answer is you can't. And there's many reasons: bad data, the set of instructions that you're giving it might not be good enough. And then also, there are certain things that you rather have a human handle than an AI. Like, perfect example, do you want an AI model really handling your refunds? Possibly, maybe, but for the most part, you probably want to have someone talk to a real person to be able to handle something like that. Because at the end of the day, maybe you don't have the right safeguards in place, and then someone is managing to social engineer the AI agent to give them more money than they should have gotten back. There are so many different things you have to think of when you are setting up this AI. It's like, yeah, it's an amazing tool, but how do you set up that tool to actually make sure it's going to be successful for your business? And I think that's the biggest thing that Sam and I are both seeing, is everyone thinks they could solve with it, but they don't know how to fully implement it and set it up for true success. And I think that's the biggest topic of today, is what can we all do as providers together to help these customers understand how can you implement it safely, but also make sure it ends up overturning a lot of outcome and ROI at the end of the day.
Sam, I'm going to get your take on it in a second. I just want to follow up. That is one thing, we do a lot of these webinars around CCaaS, and I've done a few podcasts on it as well, AI in the CCaaS space and the CX space. But one of the things that a lot of the experts talk about is making sure that you understand the use case for the AI. And the example you gave with the refunds is a great example, but maybe a better example is in healthcare, right? You don't want an AI giving someone sensitive test results that might be bad news, or you have to think about kind of the human factor and think through those use cases. And I bring it up here because I think sometimes, at least me, maybe this is maybe I'm just off base, but I do feel like when I think about UCaaS, I feel like there's less complexity. It just seems like a simpler type of transformation project than thinking about designing a customer experience. But I think what I'm hearing from you guys is maybe there is similar complexity to it, and it needs to be handled thoughtfully.
Yeah, I think from a UC perspective too, kind of the differences of AI from a UC perspective, that of contact center is more like enhancing productivity internally with your, whatever you're doing, process wise internally versus how can we make the customer experience better with an AI tool. So a good example of that is I manage a sales team across the country, right? I have reps that are on Teams conference calls all day long, and we use Copilot, as our AI tool. What we've seen is our pre-sales process to when the customers want to go to implementation is much more thorough now because the salespeople recording these calls, getting all the information from Copilot to then send to the project management team to then implement the solution is much more accurate, right? We're not missing small things that the customer once, told us about on call 1 out of 15, right? We're not perfect. We can't remember everything. We take notes in OneNote as well, but again, not 100% accurate all the time. So tools like that from a UC perspective, yes, that's customer facing tools, but it's more productivity focused. In a contact center world, the CX or the AI tools are more used for customer experience, taking some of the busy work off of that agent versus help. It does help the agent become more productive, but it's a little bit different. And there is some overlap, right? There's overlap from UC and CX when it comes to like database integrations, like Raf was talking about. You want to make sure your data that you're giving this AI bot access to is accurate. So then, you can leverage that for, questions and answers that your customers have, or just questions that you have in general, and, trying to find the right documentation. So yeah, the data piece is very important. That's why anytime a customer goes to implement any AI solution, whether it's CX focused or UCaaS focused, they want to make sure they have the right team, and they want to make sure they're asking the right questions during that project standpoint or the implementation process. So then when they go to make this, an actual live solution, it works the way they want it to. And, it actually does help them as a business, right? There's a lot to it, right? It's complex, but it's definitely helping, in some aspects of business, right?
Sure. Uh, so as a recovering salesperson myself, I can say without casting aspersions that we're not known for our attention to detail and note-taking abilities, and we're certainly not known for entering all of that into CRM systems the way that we're supposed to. So this tool definitely can close that gap, right? And I can see a world where having better notes and building that internal institutional knowledge that would have been lost on that phone call once it was disconnected before can actually help reduce the sales cycle. It can help maybe sell more into that business. It can help maybe strategize on that account for future opportunities. And so that made me think, Raf, how would you go about building the business case for UCaaS by going to different stakeholders like sales leadership and maybe other departments, and kind of talking through how you can create efficiency, increase productivity, and maybe grow top line revenue by implementing a solution like this?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is understanding their biggest pain points internally. What is stopping them from exceeding certain levels of success, whether it's from a sales cycle perspective, deals closing, or maybe even just a basic customer service standpoint that's not even contact center related. Um, when we start to talk about AI to our customers these days, that one of the first things we ask is, hey, like if you are going to be working with someone on a day-to-day basis, what are some tasks that you wish to automate in a way? And they'll tell us, hey, I wish I did have better note taking capabilities. I wish I had the ability to, instead of having to go here, here, and here and to ask my questions, I could just go to one single source of truth. And that is like the two common things that we tend to see. So, of course, the first question comes around as well, do we have the ability to pull all this data into one spot? The answer is yes. Like, is it categorized? Is it segregated? Is there a way for us to be able to easily identify what is for what and what is for who? And if the answer is no, then we have to help them create a plan to organize that data so that way when we do feed it into a model, it is safe and easy for it to consume. And that way it can understand, hey, this is for sales, this is for service, and then this is for support, for example. Those are all things that are big parts of the game. And then, of course, the second step is understanding how long, like, what are their expectations for implementation? Since they're already dealing with this struggle now, how soon can we get this implemented so they can start to see a turnkey of results over time within usually a month to, usually you don't see AI results for about 30 to 90 days. I mean, that's just realistically like where you start to see the ROI begin to happen. So the end goal is to have them up and running within those 30 to 90 days and then start to see the slow return of like, hey, internally, we're starting to be able to go here and ask these questions, and that's saving me a lot of time. Oh, I'm using something like the Copilot, like Sam was saying, for my sales cycle, and I'm seeing it improve my experience for maybe professional services. Professional services loves that stuff. Because I remember like in the past when I first started as being an SE, I always wanted to make sure I didn't miss one thing on the scoping call, because if I did, you know how easily that could backfire. Like, and it could have been one of the most important things and you just missed the most important thing. And you go to implementation, they implement, you forget that one thing and they're like, well, what about this? Oh my gosh, I totally forgot, or I didn't go back and look at that recording. That is a thing in the past now, because we can use like those AI tools to be able to get that meeting summary. So that's where I'm starting to see some, and how I would start the implementation process to help these guys for sure with those two items.
So 31% of the people that are watching this recording are probably going to have a legacy on-prem system. That's what the data tells us, right? So maybe not our audience, because they're so much more advanced than that, right? But in general, some people are going to have on-prem equipment here. And I'm wondering if you can help build the case for migration to the cloud, moving away from those legacy systems through the lens of integration. In other words, what are they gaining by going to a UCaaS platform in terms of the ability to do integrations, and what are the limitations with legacy equipment?
Sure. Yeah. So I think as far as benefits go, think 10 years ago or even farther than that, when you were replacing an on-premise system, a lot of these unified communication systems could not do the traditional phone system functionality, like things like even faxing or analog lines, or the ability to do things like shared line appearance or traditional line key phone system capabilities, right? You pick up a call, put it on hold, and have someone down the office pick that call up on another line, right? Things like that were scary for customers that are migrating from a prem system to a cloud system. But now they're available, and there's different ways to make that. Customers are making decisions not based on necessarily the traditional functionality anymore. It's more, how integrated can we get with the solution from a unified communication perspective, and what makes the most sense for the business. So a good example of that is a lot of customers are trying to use applications they have today, right? Like WebEx or Zoom or Teams, right? And integrating all forms of communication into those centralized apps. So traditionally, customers were making decisions based on those traditional functionality requirements that they have from a prem-based system. Now it's more, what can we do to increase productivity and integrate more of that communication into a centralized pane of glass to simplify the process, like Raph was talking about earlier. Simplification is more of the reason why customers are making decisions towards cloud-based communications, not only to simplify the implementation process, but to simplify what the users are using from an application perspective. So everyone's communicating on the same window, basically, right? Now, some of the, I guess, downsides of migrating from a legacy system to a cloud-based system, not downsides, but caveats you run into, is a lot of customers out there that are using traditional phone systems have old phones out there, right? Or they have, fax lines out there, or they have, paging systems that are analog still. There's different ways to integrate those into cloud-based solutions. Now, the handsets themselves, depending on what the handsets are, those can be difficult to integrate into a cloud-based system depending on what, firmware they're running behind the scenes, right? Like traditional Avaya phones, Mitel, ShoreTel phones, even old Cisco phones, they don't really work nicely in a cloud-based world, right? They're not SIP-enabled phones. So depending on what the customer has, there are options to reuse those phones. And a lot of the providers out there have application based like provisioning software to make that transition easier if you're trying to use legacy equipment or use legacy phones. And then there's also ways to tie back cloud based systems to premise based infrastructure like paging systems or fax machines or, analog lines, for example. So it's all there now as far as functionality goes. Customers are making more of their decisions based on what applications they're using internally and trying to simplify that process.
Sure. Um, Raf, I think you made a strong case for what are the more obvious, both of you have made a strong case for what are the obvious integrations, right? The obvious use cases. What is a less obvious one? And, just from your perspective, what are the biggest missed opportunities that you see frequently when people deploy UCaaS?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest missed opportunities that we tend to see is almost just think of it as maybe not just necessarily from like an integration standpoint, but we sometimes think too far ahead in terms of user adoptability. A big problem that Sam and I have seen over the years is going to be being able to adapt to a new environment, especially when you come from like an on-prem system, for example. It's a learning curve. It's a learning curve for a lot of people because back in the day, what'd you do? You just picked up your phone, you put it on hold, you put it on a line two, you have someone else pick it up. All simplistic things. And then now you bring in this new UCaaS provider and they have call recording. You can use this soft phone application to do XYZ. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm not used to something like this. So I think sometimes we fail to realize the audience. Sometimes you need to understand how easy is it going to be for them to adapt and learn to this type of environment. And that's another reason why we're starting to still see people kind of stay behind on these legacy platforms because they're afraid of change or they know that their user base is going to struggle with adopting to technology like this. So what we can do as providers is we can try our best to understand, okay, you know what? Maybe we can still use the dust phones today, even though the goal for a lot of us is to not use them anymore. Let's try to make that use case work for them. Let's bring them as much simplification as possible and what processes they're used to doing, whether that's line key emulation, busy landfill, stuff like that. Let's try to implement that with these guys so that way they can have a more comfortable experience while feeling like, hey, we're using a new phone system, but it kind of feels familiar to me and it's easy for me to understand. So I think that is one big thing. I know it's not integration related, but in my opinion, I think that's one of the biggest things that people fail to see, especially when it's like trying to figure out, do we migrate? Do we not?
Yeah, adoption is always a challenge with any kind of technology implementation, right? A new software that you're rolling out, whoever is running the project, they've got these grand ideas about how you're going to generate ROI, but it really relies on people using the tool that you're rolling out. And it's interesting that we're kind of in a time now where there's multiple generations that are in the workplace and there's multiple generations that are in the market that we're serving, right? And so on one side, you've got people in the market that want to communicate one way, and you've got people internally that want to communicate another way. And it just comes down to generational technology preferences. Can a UCaaS platform kind of be the nexus, be the bridge between generations and meet everyone where they're at?
I think so. I
Yeah,
do.
and that's a good question, Sean. And I would say that the answer is yes, right? There's different, tools and functionality you can build out with these new cloud-based unified communication solutions. I think what customers need to realize as well is the benefits are going to outweigh the, end user adoption anxiety, if you will, or the, angst to get to a new platform. And also it's about showing the users that, hey, the functionality's there. It's just going to be a little different with the new system. because all the buttons, bells and whistles, all the functionality is pretty similar from traditional phone systems to, new UCaaS applications, if you will. It's more just about explaining to the users that we're used to, doing the traditional phone system capabilities from a line key perspective on their phone itself, what that looks like in a cloud-based environment, and mainly just training them on the differences. So then the business impact is going to be much more beneficial for a majority of the user group than just that small group that's, not willing to change or doesn't want to change. I think that's a big miss too, back to, your other question. That's a big miss from companies is they are making decisions, or most companies that are going cloud-based are making decisions based on the benefit of going to a cloud-based application. Some companies are missing out moving that direction because they're worried about changing those different types of users in the organization and worrying about not necessarily scaring them out of the company, but giving them a solution that's not the exact same as what they're using. So that end user adoption gets a little bit, scary, if you will, from an IT, um, perspective, right? But
Sure. I can imagine a world where productivity takes a hit if you have a lot of people that are more comfortable with the older technology, and there's going to be a learning curve for them to pick it up, right? So maybe
for
that's something
sure.
that people need to plan for. Um, so, Raf, aside from adaptability, which it seems like you both agree that's a big miss. What are some common challenges that you see when customers try to you know integrate their UCaaS platform with critical applications within the business?
Yeah, some of the issues that we tend to run into are limitations with APIs actually, and it might not be from the UCaaS provider itself; it's from the software provider. There's many of them out there that it's a pay to play space. So they will actually have their customers pay additional premium in order to get access to tools and the API tool sets to be able to integrate with other providers. And that can actually sell someone, you know what, that's not even worth the change for me, because now I'm paying you guys, I'm paying my software provider more. Like, how are we actually simplifying this process if I'm spending a lot more money in the long run? And I think that's a common thing that people hang on to. And while I agree with them, price is of course extremely important, especially in today's world, but we also have to remember, is it the most important thing though? And that's a big thing, is like sometimes price isn't. Sometimes you have to set price aside in order to accomplish your goals. And if we can accomplish the goals together, whether it's like, hey, you know what, you do have to pay a little bit more to use this API model, but at the end of the day, it's going to save you all this time. Once again, that time turns into money. Time is now money. So instead of spending 3 or 4 hours extra a day putting in all your notes and you're paying an employee to do this, save that time. Instead of those 3 to 4 hours a day, they don't have to do that anymore. They can just go home when their shift is up, for example. And therefore, you're saving money on overtime. So, I mean, it's just little pieces of information that you have to kind of put together, build that use case around them for, and be able to show them, look, at the end of the day, there's a bigger and brighter tunnel there. We just need to go through this together. And sometimes you do have to take that bigger leap, whether it's paying just a little bit more to do that, to get that done. Let's do it together. But most of the time, that's what I always see. It's a pay to win model, or they don't even have the ability to integrate with other providers at all. So that once again, they're stuck still in their same ways, but now they have a whole new system they're learning alongside with that.
Sam, same question.
Yeah, I would agree with Raf on that. I would also say it's more about the integration challenges we're seeing with older systems. So yes, pay to play is one thing, but also some of the contact center companies we're working with, or even just companies that are using internal databases, they have all this information in, SharePoint or, drives, if you will, that aren't necessarily easily accessible from these open APIs, or what information can we even pull from these systems? And they're doing things maybe in disparate systems as well. Maybe they have 5 different systems that, one CRM or one database could do for them, right? So I think a lot of the time when we're dealing with customers like that, it's almost taking a step backwards and saying, hey, maybe we should look at this from a not necessarily a UC first perspective, but look at how can you guys improve internal processes with the applications you're using, and then look at how AI or these integrations can help once you guys get more advanced from a internal process perspective, right? So we're kind of seeing that as almost a holdup, if you will, or a caveat, right? A lot of companies now are moving to cloud-based applications. So the API integrations are, open APIs are easy to hook into those different apps. But when it comes to older systems, that's where we're seeing some, holdups, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. We're seeing that a lot, making sure that your data is ready for AI in particular, right? But really, um, so much of technology today is about accessing data within the enterprise, and so just making sure that your data is right and that you've got policies and governance around all that data. And it makes me wonder too: is security a source of friction in these kind of projects? Do you run into issues around cybersecurity and compliance with a platform like this being integrated with so many different systems? Raf, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, we do. A lot of the times is we got to figure out what kind of data is going to be stored, what data is going to be accessed. That's extremely important, especially when it comes to like healthcare or think about banks, Fiserv. That's a big one, right? PCI compliance is a large thing in that space. And obviously we cannot be accessing credit card numbers. We shouldn't be able to see that stuff, whether it's from a call recording perspective or even a transcription perspective. So we got to make sure we're following those compliances. The second thing we have to also ask ourselves as well, in the event that we are doing some form of integration, is everything being able to be encrypted at transit and at rest and things like that. So a lot of, especially when we talk to these leaders, whether it's like the IT leaders of their world and they're trying to understand like, hey, what are your guys' security protocols? That's going to be a big standard item or big standard ask. And at the end of the day, of course, security is going to be one of the most important things to make sure not only are we upholding our end of the bargain, but whatever we're integrating with is also secure, because we also want to make sure that from both ends of the perspective, we're taking care of both of that. Because at the end of the day, we all know that if there is something that goes wrong, it's an expensive it's expensive because it's a breach of something. Someone finds out, and now you have to report it, and then you go down this rabbit hole of additional legal fees and costs. You don't want to have to do that. And then of course you also don't want to lose your customers because you had some form of breach. So peace of
Right.
mind is going to be one of the biggest things, especially that I feel like a lot of people kind of just they glaze over it because they know it's important, but sometimes you have to really just take it from their perspective, especially if they're in a specific world that requires that strong set of security. You have to approach it with kindness and care from that as well.
Sure. Sam, aside from the security risks and making sure that you've got your data in place, what are some other risks that are inherent to this kind of transformation? Maybe you could tackle them in two different ways, legacy on-prem to cloud, or maybe cloud to cloud migration, and what are some best practices to ensure a successful project?
Yeah, I guess the first thing we do is we kind of vet out the compliance or security parameters that the customer is looking for. So a lot of the time when we work with different industries, they require different types of compliance, right? Whether it's defense contractors that need CMMC or ITAR compliance, it's the SLED companies of the world, the financial companies of the world, companies that require HIPAA compliance. There's different parameters behind, what data can be stored and what applications they're allowed to use to hit on those compliance requirements. When a customer has a premise-based system, there's always that discussion. Well, we manage this internally and we know where it's being housed. This is why we think this is the most secure option. But if you look at where all these unified communication companies are storing their SBCs, their servers, the data is being stored in these super secure clouds now with armed guards at the front door, right? I always look back to customers. Let's look at something as simple as faxing, right? HIPAA compliance used to require you to still fax to a physical fax machine. Do you think a physical fax machine where anyone in that office can go run by and grab a fax with, patient data on it, right? Or medical records on it is more secure than that being stored in the cloud, encrypted at transit and rest? No, right? So as far as risk goes, there's not really, from what we've seen, there's not really risk um, caveats going from a prem system to a cloud system. You just want to make sure when you're positioning a product to this customer that we are looking at what compliance requirements that they have what data that they want, the UCaaS provider, CCaaS provider to be storing, where that is being stored, and, kind of the parameters behind what they're looking for, right? Because then that way, it mitigates the risk. And also we can explain to them how we've done this for customers similar to them in the past.
Here. Okay, so final two questions. I'm going to ask both these questions to both of you. First, I want you to look in your crystal ball, starting with you, Raf. What's next in the UCaaS space? What are some trends that people should be looking out for?
What's next is agentic AI. That's I know people hate to hear it, but it really is what's next. And this is what you need to think about it as. Agentic AI, and I always use this use case as this. If you guys might remember in the past, whether it was elementary school or maybe you helped your kids with homework, but who remembers the peanut butter and jelly sandwich instruction protocol? Like they gave you that task, like give me instructions on how to do a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This is the same for agentic AI. So if I always say, if I can give a random person on the street a set of instructions, if they can follow those instructions to the T without asking me a lot of follow-up questions, if the answer is yes, I've written an amazing set of instructions that an agentic agent can understand. If the answer is no, the agentic agent is not going to understand and it's going to have issues going through with that. So when we start to think about the agentic side of things, really understand how well are your instructions going to be? What are you really trying to solve for? And in the UCaaS space, we're starting to really just see it being used from an internal perspective. So knowledge base, they want to be able to ask you questions. And then, of course, maybe even do simple things like scheduling an appointment for them. And like someone at a front desk where they're doing a medical doctor's office. Patient can call in. It doesn't have to collect really crazy information. It can just collect super basic information. Therefore, they're within compliance and it can integrate with their calendar. And then it checks the calendar. Oh, this doctor's available. Let's go ahead and put it through that time block. And then let's go ahead and collect that data and send a confirmation email. That saves the front desk person a lot of time. It can just simply be automated from that perspective. And then on the contrary, just making sure your data is set, and then whatever you're trying to accomplish, you're really having those great discussions, whether at first with Amplix and then whatever UCaaS or CCaaS provider you guys go with. Understand the processes first before you just go headfirst into this agentic thing. It's not what you think it is. It is amazing, but at the end of the day, like I said, if you don't have a good set of instructions for it, or you don't really understand what you're trying to solve for, do not just implement it just because you think that's the right answer. Wait until you have those things set in place and then move forward with it.
That's what's scary, right? Is you would have a lot of teachers with sticky fingers because the kids didn't specify that, the peanut butter and jelly are supposed to be on the inside of the sandwich, right? So how do you know that you're giving it the right instructions until it actually goes off the rails and does something crazy? But Sam, same question. What's coming?
Yeah, I agree with Raf on the AI side. I kind of want to add to the agentic side also conversational AI. So a common thing that we're hearing about in contact centers is we don't want to implement AI for frontline customer experience, because every time you call into a customer service line and you hear that AI bot, what's the first thing you do? Try to get to an, right? Exactly. So what I think is coming what is definitely coming in the near future, and we're seeing it now, is enhancements in the conversational AI tools. So when the tools are getting much better, and they're even getting like friendlier, if you will, from like a tone perspective instead of being super robotic. So a good example is we were doing, a demo with a customer, and they were asking us about translation into various languages. So when, let's say I call in, I'm English speaking, but I'm calling into a, French speaking support team or Spanish speaking support team. These tools now are able to real time translate what I'm saying in English through an AI bot back to the French speaking person. There's a little bit of delay now, but what I'm talking about in the, near future here is that's actually going to be real time, or, close as possible to real time. So that experience is going to allow companies to hire globally, not worry about, hiring people that speak multiple languages, because these tools are going to be able to do that for them. So that's one use case that I think is going to be really cool down the road. And we're already seeing it in today's world. And then another piece of that too is these AI tools, the information that you give them, they can do a lot more in this agentic world that Raf's talking about. So a good example is we were just on a demo where one of the AI tools that we use was integrating into so many different applications to improve that customer experience. This was a flat tire scenario, right? The typical, customer service experience that you hear for like AAA. Person calls in, hey, I have a flat tire. It's raining out, you know, and then the AI bot literally talks back to the person and says, I'm sorry this is happening. Here's the closest spot you can go to for shelter. It texts the person a link to like Google Maps to go to that shelter, right? So these are what Raf and I were talking about earlier, specific use cases of integrations that these AI tools are going to be doing down the road for customers to really enhance that customer experience. Because if I'm a customer calling in and I'm getting rained on and I have a flat tire and AAA helps me find shelter, I'm going to be pumped, right? So it's things like that. That's the future I see, right? The AI future, where it is now, and then it's enhancing every day, right? It's getting better and better every day. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting that translation thing that you were talking about. Another use case for AI right now is regional accents. So if you've got a person calling in from the South and they're talking to a contact center or someone, that's in the North, they can adjust for the accent so that people feel more comfortable, right? It's not even necessarily just about understanding, although it's funny, Sam, we were just in Nashville together, and one of the events that we were at, I asked the bartender for a wooder. I'm from Philly. We say wooder. She didn't know what I was talking about, and I didn't realize she didn't understand. And it took us a minute to come to common ground that I just wanted a little glass of H2O. Um, but Raf, I'm going to go back to you and ask final question. What's one piece of advice that you could give anyone that's listening, any technology leader that's considering a move to UCaaS or integrating their platform, with other applications in the business?
Yeah. There are tons of vendors out there. The hard part is going to be understanding which one is the right one for you. And it's a matter of understanding your day-to-day processes. So just like Sam was saying, just like we would do a scoping call with you guys, internally scope this out yourselves. Understand how are your day-to-days, what are some things you're trying to solve for, and understanding at the end of the day, what is an application after you see a couple. I'm not going to say go demo with like every single vendor possible, because I promise you'll be out demoed and you'll be so tired of that. Work with Amplix, find a couple of vendors that fit the niche for what you're trying to do, demo with them. Even if you can, get a proof of concept, guys. Proof of concept, it is key. Test it out. Understand to see if it works for you, because you'll find out pretty quickly this doesn't work for me and this is not what I want. And therefore, you're not stuck in a contract. So test them out, trial them out, ask all the right questions. And I think the biggest questions you're probably going to want to ask is, how can you help simplify my day to day? Are there a lot of integrations that are available? Make sure you can integrate with some form of CRM or whatever you guys are using internally. And then last but not least, just remember, it truly is. And I'm not saying this for any specific reason, but it's not always about price either. There will be some vendors that are priced higher or lower. It comes down to what can handle what you need to do in the right fashion. And that's what you should go with. So just because something is cheaper, and guess what, you might miss out on XYZ that this other vendor might have. It's not always about that. I understand price is important, but really just think about at the end of the day what you can solve for, and think about the long-term goal, what it will do at the end of the day. So that's all I got to say for my last sentence.
That's great advice. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Sam, you get the final word. What's the advice that you've got?
Yeah, I'm totally going to agree with Raf's point as well, right? Vetting it out internally, understanding what you're doing, but also from a communication perspective. But also, I think to kind of expand on that is look at each one of your departments, exactly what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and how this new unified communication application is going to affect them. That's what's missed a lot during the pre-sales or the consultative approach standpoint, is how each department's using the software or using the phone system today, how that's going to affect them when they change to a new application, for the better and for the worse, right? There might be some loss of functionality or differences in functionality, but then there's going to be a ton to gain. So make sure when you're doing that vetting with Amplix, right, or, internally at the customer side, make sure you're vetting out all different departments and all different personnel, not every single person individually, because that would take forever, right? For some of these larger customers. but really just looking at it, as a blanket approach to make sure what you're implementing is the right application for all the different departments out there.
Got it. All right, gentlemen, I've got one bonus question for you. We're recording this 2 days before Thanksgiving. Appreciate you being in the office to do this. So starting with you, Raf, most underrated Thanksgiving side dish.
Oh my gosh. Most underrated?
Underrated.
Ah, if I had to pick one, um, it would probably be like a savory yam casserole. So that's actually a little bit different. Everyone goes the sweet route. They get like the marshmallows, they get the brown sugar and all that. Do it with the savory approach. Just like if you have a normal loaded baked potato, do it with the yams instead. And I promise you, like, you're gonna love it just as much as you would love the sweet one.
I appreciate that response. Sam, how about you?
I'm going to go with green bean casserole. And the reason I'm going with that is a lot of people kind of knock it, right? I forgot what movie that was from, but someone was like, oh, no, not the green bean casserole again, right? If it's cooked well and it's crispy and you still have the soft green beans in the inside, if you cook it right, I think that's one of the most underrated side dishes on Thanksgiving. So I'm
I
gonna get a
agree.
little for that, Sean, probably, but I like it.
I agree with that 100%. I'm going to go with pineapple stuffing. I'm a savory stuffing kind of guy, but once in a while that sneaks on the table, and I always go back for seconds. So,
That sounds good.
gentlemen,
Season your
thanks so much
food.
yeah, thanks so much for your time and expertise. Appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks,
everybody.
Sean. Thanks for having us.